This is Oblivion Remastered, Skyblivion. And that down there is a dungeon, Fort Shaolman, which I was somehow allowed to make. And in this video, I'm going to give you a behind the scenes look at this dungeon and how I went about making it, split into 3 sections to give you a chance to do the same. In part 1, we're going to run through how I ended up building this thing from its original old Oblivion design with its small circular tower and repetitive interior, to its now grand stature overlooking the banks of the Imperial City, and its depths that dwell into the dark abyss of this flooded fortress. In part 2, I'll be showcasing the dungeon itself, showing some gameplay and giving you a look at how it can come together within the actual game. And finally, in part 3, I will show you how you can do it yourself and get involved with the project, even if you have no modding experience whatsoever. So strap in and get ready to be taken on a Skyrim modding trip to learn how you can help be a part of finishing one of the biggest Skyrim modding projects to ever be released.
I choose this as our goal.
Creatures of none.
Men are kings. If he breeds, he is sin.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Not Samson and Broom, all right? Bone man!
So naturally, the first step in my quest to design my own dungeon was to start with actually learning how to use the creation kit. And so, as a playground to figure things out, I was assigned this small vineyard house, which in its current state didn't even have a door. So that was the first thing I decided to add, so you could actually get inside. And from there came just learning how to use the creation kit. You drag things onto your screen, snap them onto each other if you choose, and manipulate and rotate objects to fit whatever type of style you are trying to build. And in the end, I managed to put together a pretty decent little house, fit with a cozy bedroom, a wine tasting attic space to fit with the vineyard the residents run outside, and I finished it off with a cellar which they can use to store up their supplies. But my work on interiors didn't quite end there, as my next expedition in decor had me tackling a few city-dwelling venues. Bruma's Geraldview Inn, a warm cozy place to commune with locals and rent a room for the night. Braville's Mages Guild, a mystical hub fit to house all Braville's most inquisitive students of the magical arts. The Braville Fighters Guild, a refuge for all the rough and tough warriors in the region to train and toast while carrying out their guildly duties. And after working on a number of these areas, each consisting of different styles and purposes, I felt like I had a pretty good understanding of how the creation kit worked and how to bring to life many of the ideas I had for each of these locations in a way which hopefully helps them stand out to the player while completing any quests that partake there, or even if they are just exploring and interacting with the worlds of Cyrodiil. And once each of these areas was complete, I felt that I had enough of an understanding in order to tackle my initial goal of learning level design. So I think it's about time we took a look at the dungeon I was about to reconstruct. Back in the Elder Scrolls IV, Oblivion, stood a lone Heartland tower, Fort Shaolman. While it was plotted pretty close to the Imperial City, the fort mostly went unnoticed by a lot of players. It had no quests, no story, and its design was almost identical to every other fort in the game. And its interior was no different. Sure, it had some gloomy charm, I guess, but so did every other fort in Oblivion because they were all very similar in design. So I aimed to set out to make it stand out and give it the glow up it deserved, which first began with the basic skeleton of the dungeon, placing a rough cut of walls and floors, in order to recreate a similar structure both size-wise, but also to ensure that Oblivion's old layout stayed pretty much exact in my new updated version. And with some time, I began to have something I could work with some rooms being completely designed and decorated, while most of the dungeon during this first pass was just roughly plotted out, and really the main goal of this first draft was just to give myself enough visual cues that when I came to develop each of the dungeon's rooms later down the line, I would have some sort of an idea of what I intended to do with it. The entrance I designed and completed straight away, with this skylit corridor and curiously boarded passage ahead. But at this stage, the rest of the dungeon was either empty or sort of roughly thrown together. But from the beginning, I already knew I wanted the main chamber to be this interesting flooded temple room, which would have the player both navigate across the water and make use of the verticality of the temple in order to proceed. And the final stage of the dungeon would keep more in line with the beginning, and was mostly a destroyed prison setting, ending with the Imperial crypts that lay at the end of the level, that I also wanted to offer a unique encounter which we'll touch on in the preview later on. But now came the exciting bit, actually decorating and fleshing out many of these rather blank interiors I plotted out beforehand, and this meant fixing up some lighting and atmospherics along with reworking and in some cases breaking up some of those very rooms, but adding some extra structural decorations. And in most cases this stage was really just about telling the story of this fort, which is why I found it the most fun part of development, being able to imagine what this place was used for in a time prior to its collapse into ruin. And then thinking, okay, so how would it look now after the events of both what happened here, but also the natural decay of time? And something about that process just really makes crafting a dungeon like this really fun to do. Especially a dungeon which in Oblivion had no story, quest, or purpose, which obviously, while within reason, meant I had free reign to let my imagination run wild and come up with some neat little features and areas. And finally, after a few good months of occasionally coming back to work on the dungeon in between making regular videos for you guys, I got to a point where I was finally happy with the level of detail I was able to add, and actually flesh out those initial ideas into a fully decorated and designed dungeon. I gave the offering chamber more ambience and clutter. I extended some small sections out to provide more optional lootable locations. I relit and decorated many of the dungeon's connecting hallways. But the most important changes came to the main temple chamber, which went through a big transformation from my initial rough design, letting light burst through the ceiling, shining down into the depths of its new underwater area, which I'm actually pretty happy with the way it ended up looking, removing many of the arches which were cluttering the upper level, raising walkways almost as high as I could in order to make them more hidden and hard to spot, along with adding a secret tunnel passageway at the height of the rafters. And when it came to those final areas leading the player out of the dungeon, I tried to actually simplify my initial design and make its usage more believable for the guards at the time. And with those final changes and mechanics added, I think it's more than time to give you a better in-game look at the new Fort Shaolman. And that's going to be all we'll be showing from the dungeon in this video. I didn't want to spoil too much, but I hope you enjoyed that little sneak peek at some of the areas you'll be discovering when you play. But don't leave, now is the most important part of this video. Everything before this point I put together to give you a good reason to hear this message. You can help with development. Yes, you. One thing I found out pretty quickly when I made that first initial vineyard house is the creation kit, at least level design wise, is actually really intuitive. I mean, look, you can search for an object, literally drag it onto your screen and move it wherever you want. Now there is a lot more you can do, but I think people overestimate how hard it is to learn a tool such as this. I mean, I certainly did. And I promise you, I'm not an exception. If you can build a house in The Sims, you can build a house in the creation kit. In fact, in some cases it might actually be easier in the creation kit. So if you've been following the project for a while, waiting for its release thinking, I'd love to help but I don't have any skills to do so, give the creation kit a go. I think many people will be surprised with what they're able to do. And just a final note on this message, if you do want to help out, just build something with vanilla assets, a house, a church, whatever, and submit the plugin in your application. That's all that's needed to test for the level design department. And honestly, now is the best time it could ever be to sign up. Even if a bunch of you just make one single interior and turn them in and do nothing else ever again, collectively you could help speed up the development exponentially and get this thing out sooner than you think. But that's all the pestering I'll do in regards to recruitment. For my stuff, if you're a regular visitor of the channel and you're looking to buy a new PC, then you can head over to my page at Apex Gaming PCs and pick between 3 different tiers of gaming rigs designed after my own specs, so all of those links can be found in the description. You can also use code BURNS at checkout for 5% off your purchase, which when spending a bunch of money on expensive items like gaming PCs can be a good chunk of money saved. But I won't ramble on any further, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.